I am a teller of stories. Not only do I read stories, I write them too. Therefore, it should be obvious that I am a fan of narratives. I do, of course, have my preferred genres, most of which reside in the fictional domain. There's just something about getting lost in a good tale, to see and experience the descriptions come to life in one line. A good story can take you anywhere. Yes, I do watch TV, and I'm a movie buff as well, but these give you the images, spoon-feeding you the descriptions that are better left to the machinations of cognition. Words, rather than images, evoke the imagination, call upon past experiences, and provide you with a world that is almost as intensely real to the person imagining it as it is personal. It seemed a natural course of action to become a peddler and avid indulger of fiction, spreading these stories through a digital forum. A lasting devotion to this hobby has even provoked those with like interests to send me their personal works for the purposes of said digital delivery, typically accomplished via narration and upload to either YouTube or SoundCloud. For the most part, I encourage this behavior. After all, what kind of horrible person would I be to stifle someone else's creativity? And the fringe rewards reaped from cultivating budding authors is nothing short of an honor. Well, enthusiasm breeds little foresight, and I may have gotten myself into more than I had originally understood. I will leave the identity of the individual who submitted these stories anonymous, for reasons that I'm sure will be inferentially obvious. I didn't realize that there was a problem right away. Over the past year, I've had a lot of work submitted to me, and I don't watch much television because of career-associated time restraints, so how could I know? But all in all, maybe I should pardon my own ignorance. But that seems a little too self-gratifying. Either way, I suppose there's no harm in submitting the holistic experience anymore. And actually, I did once already have the first of these stories narrated and ready for publication. But with insights I'll get into later, the whys of previous decisions are meaningless now. So, without holding back, here's where it began. Voyeurism by Anonymous. Stephen sat on the bus, staring out the window and at the images that passed him by. The world outside raced past, but not fast enough. He was in a hurry to get home, eager to begin what he perceived to be a rewarding nightlife that he led online during his off hours. Work was droll and interactions mundane. It seemed to him that for some reason, interesting people only existed within that digital cyberspace. Stephen heard the sound of squealing brakes and the inertia that carried him forward as the bus slowed. The 105 had finally brought him to his destination, about a half a block away from his dismal one-bedroom apartment, in which he resided alone. Stephen hurried from his seat and the few hundred feet to his doorstep, but he never expected to find the gift left for him a few feet from his front door, an unmarked VHS cassette. Stephen's mind couldn't process what it was perceiving at first. The film began benign and unassuming, much like a home movie. But it wasn't long before a more sinister notion was considered, motivated by obvious purposes of the scenes playing out before him. There was first footage of a man walking down the street, then the same man on a different street, captured from within a moving car as it drove by, and then, finally, of the same man walking towards the camera from a great distance, before the camera's view shifted to that of an outside door. Stephen didn't recognize the man, or the door, or any of the other images as well. The video jump cut to a door being open to reveal a moderate-sized living room. A small aperture led to what Stephen assumed to be a hallway on the left, and whoever was holding the camera crept slowly towards it. As they did, an object lifted into view, apparently held by the same person taking the footage and holding the camera. Only a small portion was visible at first, flat, dark, almost black, and with an almost unnoticeable shine, like wrought iron. A few steps further, and Stephen identified the object as the head of an axe. Just as this concept had been realized before it could truly be processed, the man who had been in all the scenes up until this one came from around the corner of the hallway, jumped backward, and shrieked in fright at the sight of whomever was holding the camera. Stephen desperately wished he could close his eyes as the head of the axe was buried deep into the man's skull, spraying blood and spurting fountains all over the walls and the camera's lens. What came next was a gruesome ballet of dismemberment, depravity, and apathy. There was so much blood at first. Stephen believed it would be some sort of elaborate prank, maybe played by some college film students attending the university only a few blocks away. Disgusted but ensnared by intrigue, Stephen fast-forwarded through much of what came after. What he saw was so astonishing, he had to stop and watch it play out a few times along the way. Always different people. Some male, some female, old, young. It didn't seem to matter. But all were followed in different scenes and contexts by the camera before being brutally axed to death behind closed doors. When Stephen reached near the end of the tape, he stopped and played once again. And this time, his breath hitched in his throat and his stomach turned. The events were the same, and the person different. But there was something notably unique about this one. He recognized the man being followed. It was him. It was him going to work in the morning. It was him getting on the bus and taking a seat from outside the window. It was him walking down the road towards his house before the camera turned and focused for a few still moments on his front door. Sweat rolled from Stephen's brow as he now felt the pressures of overwhelming doom and regret. The TV turned to static, and behind the noise, Stephen could hear the creak of his previously closed front door. Of course, my first reaction to this story was pretty positive. Sure, it could have used a bit more detail and development, but all in all, it was a pretty fun read, worth the time I invested in doing so. In fact, I was astonished at the author's improvement over their previous piece, which, I don't mind saying, read like it had been written by a 5-year-old. This barely seemed to be constructed by the same hand, but all the same, good. So, I even went as far as to narrate it and file it for a later upload to my website. After which, I sent an email to the author regarding how impressed I was over the improvements of his style, giving him the friendly critiques that I've already mentioned in a constructive context, and thanked him for his hard work. Nothing special. I honestly didn't see any of this coming. A week or so had passed, and lo and behold, another submission from the same author lingered in my inbox. I eagerly clicked on the subject line like a kid opening a present, excited to see if the story was as good as his last. And if so, would he have incorporated the feedback that I had provided? Batman's misery. Depression. I feel so angry. School makes me angry. School makes me sad. It hurts every day. When I wake up, I feel pain. When I go to sleep, is to the gentle caress of misery. Agony is my life. They hate me. I hate them back. I can't help but feel nauseous every day that I am herded into that school alongside of the rest of the mindless, driveling cattle that call themselves civilized. It's no wonder I venture here so often, that I revel in the isolation and tranquility of the forest. Or maybe it's just the seclusion from prying and judgmental eyes. The first time I saw them, I felt dread. Dread like I had never known. A darkness of the blackest abyss that seemed to gnaw at my very soul, devouring bits of it, sliver by sliver. The maws of so many caves, like a semblance of giant, yawning mouths, making me feel small and insignificant at both their size and the thought of what could reside within their gullets. When I heard the sound of crying, a man's sobs echoing from deep within the cavernous dark, that fear began to grow inside me exponentially. But the buds of curiosity were there too, entangled around my fear, growing with it until, even surprising to me, equal with each other. I foolishly crept my way inside, full of awe and dread in harmony. But the darkness had only a moment to consume me, only a few shaking steps in trepidation, and he approached me. Why he did, what he was, why he was in there to begin with, none of it mattered. And I knew that the sensation from that cold grip felt like nothing less than the icy clasp of death itself. Now, maybe it hijacked my mind, placed me in a calmer state. Maybe we share similar interests and visions. But in that moment, I knew what those sorrowful, gleaming white eyes, accompanied by a dangling slack jaw, pointed ears like some sort of demon, and wide, flattened-nosed beast needed, and I was compelled to abide and offer my assistance. Friends, I never had. A family that never loved, and a few I barely knew at all. The bodies were found in one of those caves, and the state of the remains was enough to nearly traumatize an entire police force and sicken a coroner to the point of vomiting, needing several moments to collect his composure. Most of the missing were identified, as bits of each corpse were correlated with one another, until collections of remains lay in heaps with labels, piles of necrotic flesh and bone, eventually a sign and identity, each with notable scrape marks across pieces of bones, as if created by sharp teeth. What bothers me most, however, they never knew what that starving, isolated, sorrowful creature of despair and malice looked like, because they never found it. Now, I did like this story. Don't get me wrong, as a story, it's really good. It's composed with great attention paid to emotional context and seemed slightly more detailed than the last piece in this sense. What rubbed me as disturbing here was the ending. I don't watch the news much, but like it is with most of you, it's hard to ignore a breaking news story once it floods such digital forums as Facebook and Twitter. It just so happened that the day before, I read something about a bunch of bodies being found in some caves in the woods of South Carolina. If the police had any leads, they weren't letting on about it. And the only details gained were that the corpses were all those of young children. With the final count, after the various body parts had been grouped together by individual, were thought to be around the vicinity of 23. but the hundreds of small scraps and bits were likely to reveal several more. For the sake of being tactful, I thought it would be in poor taste to post this story right away, but I did lend its details to my wife. Not only did she agree that I should wait, but found it to be slightly more than coincidental. What you have to understand is that my wife views all of my work as I share it either personally, far before I release it publicly, or with her as I do. So, she had listened to the first story, the one I had finished and was ready to publish that day. She told me she had also seen a queer news article on a popular media site about a man found in his home, brutally murdered in front of his TV. The state of origin: South Carolina. A demented thought wormed its way into my brain, making me cringe in pleading desperation. I had to know. Going first to my trusty laptop, I emailed the author, relaying the relevant details and promoting either mutual astonishment and a laugh at coincidence, or a terrible truth. What I received an hour later confirmed the dastardly deeds, surprising even to me, as my own creation. That is, he told me he simply took my advice, taking to heart when I told him to write what he knows. The fact that he's staging his own stories doesn't really horrify me. It just honestly pisses me off that he would steal my idea.